here we go. Visibility, monitoring, and assurance. Let's talk about this. Do you need taps, or can we pull telemetry off of devices now and have that be good enough? And what are some tools that you guys are using that you would recommend? Andre, I think you've spent some time here.
Well, so the comment here would be you definitely want visibility to the point where recently we wanted to capture some packets actually with the payload and everything because with just looking at the headers with telemetry, we just couldn't figure out what's going on. We actually had to open a change request because it turns out packet capture can be disruptive to operations. Right, so from this kind of thinking, we, for example, have a solution that we have taps permanently configured and spanning to off to the side, so we can capture that anytime without changes, you know, that kind of thing. So I think you need both. I think you want telemetry. I think you want taps, and I think you want them to be able to provide you information on demand without reconfiguring the box. That would be my point of view on this.
Now, how are you defining telemetry here? Just net flow records or other things too?
Well, how does anyone define telemetry? It is, I think it is net flow records. That's probably one of the more useful ones. On the network, we often see something along the lines of, well, this is peg in the pipe. We don't know what it is. The only thing you can look at is headers effectively, right? And see who are your top talkers, where are you going, and the users unfortunately are not always able to tell you what the source and destination is. So you're on your own there. Definitely want SFlow, NetFlow, whatever it is, line utilization. I guess that qualifies as telemetry. We've been doing it with SNMP for what, a decade now, 2 decades, but now we just call it telemetry. I mean, any counter that you can capture. If you can pay for storing it, store it. So that.
Kurt, I saw you nodding your head there, and I don't know if you've got a story you can tell us, but it was along the lines of sometimes packet capture can be disruptive.
I mean, every time I've ever turned on packet capture in my career, it's assume the outage you cause from packet capture is equal to the one you're troubleshooting, but it's still a valuable thing to have up your sleeve and use. In terms of like, I was laughing at the SNMP comment because I have this debate all the time. I love streaming telemetry, but don't block on waiting for streaming telemetry for everything. We have SNMP, we have counters for things. The biggest problem with telemetry of any description, whether it's polling via SNMP or streaming, NetFlow, is how much data you can actually store, and the larger the network, the larger the data you have to store over time. One of the challenges I got when I joined this job was there are always things that are broken in the network. So there will always be red on the dashboard, so you have to start changing the way you monitor. Well, actually, I take that back. You have to change the way you alert. I would definitely say there is no such thing as not enough visibility, but you can certainly go blind looking at a wall of numbers. You really need to optimize whatever it is you're collecting. Make sure you understand what those numbers mean, and don't set your alerting for like every single packet drop or every single problem. At scale, you start to respond to the downstream impacts of your problems as opposed to individual metrics.
Which really does take us back to tools again, because we need some kind of a tool that's going to take all those numbers and help us make sense of them and alert us on actionable items, as opposed to, look, the graph looks funny. I wonder what that means. I mean, are there any tools that any of you guys have been using for telemetry, Kurt or whoever, that you care to recommend?
So ours are all in-house tools at the moment, but I think even just like the open source tools that have come out in the last 5 years, if you can operate them at enough scale to store what you need, they're great. I think the biggest pointer I can give people is have your users or your applications data stored in the same time series database so you can cross-reference application impact to network impact. That's actually the biggest value I've found, is not having a separate network monitoring stack.
I'll throw in there that one of the things we see as we evaluate customers is that they've bought every tool under the sun, and they're using maybe 5% or 10%, and even within that 10%, they're using it wrong. And so if I'm running a workshop with folks on this, usually I start with, okay, real time, right? You're the network architect or engineer. Can you show me the status of all your critical links, right? And then dividing that into, okay, status and telemetry to feed that status, and then logging, just log aggregation I put into its own category, then filtering of that logs. And then if we want to mature someone all the way up, it would be something that attempts to build rules themselves, because the log aggregation tools, you have to come up with those queries, you have to think all that logic through in your head, you have to know what to look for. Where there's some of the new stuff coming out that we have a dedicated monitoring team. They look at stuff like MoogSoft, AI ops types tools. They're looking for trends, things that are out of the ordinary. So I just deliver it, and it amazes me how many customers I go into and they can't even show me. Well, almost everyone has SolarWinds, and they don't even have an authored dashboard of like their most critical links, right? And it really should be within 60 seconds. You should know where, if any of your critical counters are hot, right? You should really know.
One more question on this then. What are your takes on visibility fabrics? In other words, should I have my data network be one network and then, have copies of that data from TAP and SPAN going off to a separate network, or maybe a visibility fabric that's pumping all that data into tools?
That's what I was referencing by SPAN always on. As much as it is a vendor plug, right? We use Big Switch monitoring fabric. For a variety of reasons, but one of them, it's always on, and is, we'll use air quotes, cheap enough to deploy, that you can always have that information off to the side and not concern the switch with, does this chip support exporting S-flow out of the management interface and this kind of thing, right? Like, you basically remove the feature requirement from the actual switch that needs to pass packets. Yeah. And you just rely on a tap. And I'm pretty sure every switch today can span to a port, right? Where not every switch can actually export, call it telemetry, to S-flow out of the management interface. So now you're dealing with like, well, they can only export it out of the data interface. Now I have to put my collector somewhere in the production network as opposed to management network. It's like a whole can of worms. One comment I wanted to make to what kind of like Tommy was saying is that we eventually realized that looking at links is not super useful anymore. And what we did is we went with Thousand Eyes and just built out critical application flows. So we can go to our Thousand Eyes dashboard and say, which application is on fire, rather than which network link is on fire, right? And then I can say, if I don't have any customer impact, then no one is calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning. There is no urgency to this. You can do it during business hours and investigate, right? Where in my previous jobs, I would get a call if a link is pegged somewhere, but there is no customer impact. So it's a different approach there, where you want to understand the impact first and then try to investigate what that is. So like to that point of, can I see all my critical links? I think in our network, we actually can't. There's just way too many of them. But we can tell you if any major application flows are impacted or not by anything. We can't tell you off the top of our heads what they're impacted by, but we can tell you yes or no. So that may be a different approach to monitoring as well there.